So good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's panel, Don't Be Stumped by STEM. My name is Tamara Young, and I'm a proud graduate of Hampton University. I also currently manage communications for both JetBlue Airways and the JetBlue Foundation. And I wanted to start the panel by just highlighting how my time at Hampton thoroughly prepared me for a career in communications and also instilled in me an appreciation for math and science, as well as a continued thirst for knowledge and education. Today's panel will have some JetBlue pilots with us to share their background and how important STEM has been in their career path. We also have some of our colleagues from our partners at Barclays Card. Some of your parents may have credit cards issued by Barclays Card. As a bank and financial institution, our partners will share how important a strong background and understanding of math and STEM is for a career in finance. In fact, a strong background in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math is especially important in a variety of careers. For example, as I work in communications and I write a lot, I often have to translate very complex STEM topics for our employees as well as for media and customers to understand. And at the JetBlue Foundation, we're also working hard to raise awareness for the variety of careers that are available within STEM and encourage students like you in attendance today as early as possible so you can solidify your path to college and beyond. Barclays Card also has a strong focus on increasing diversity in finance and STEM. So we understand that STEM may seem like a very scary topic to some, but today is all about explaining STEM and learning directly from those in various STEM fields, both of which are pretty untraditional and maybe what you don't always think of, but we want to highlight all the opportunities and options that are available for you. As we go through today's panel, we also want to highlight that we encourage you to ask questions via the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. You can submit questions and we'll get to as many as possible. Also, just before we jump into the panel, one of our joint goals between Barclays Card and JetBlue is to encourage a strong STEM course as early as possible, so you can start today as early as middle school and high school to prepare you for college. So that's enough from me. So let's jump into our panel and learn more about our panelists. So today, I believe in your upper right corner, you should see Azra Mason, who is Director and Head of Business Management for Barclays Card Legal. Hi, Azra.
Hi.
You should also see Nicole Dye Anderson, who is Associate Vice President of Media Relations for Barclays Card.
Hello, everyone. Hi.
And you have Captain Eric Scott, who is a pilot for JetBlue. Hi, Eric.
Hello. Hello.
We have First Officer Kim McCommon, who is a proud FAMU graduate. Hi, Kim.
Hey, good morning.
And then rounding out the panel, we have Miss Icy McGibbs, who is actually a founder of JetBlue. She also heads up JetBlue's corporate social responsibility, as well as our diversity, equity, and inclusion teams. Good afternoon.
Hello.
So we can jump right into our panel. I'd like to have each of you introduce yourselves and tell us a little bit about what you do. So let's start with Azra. As a proud graduate of Hampton University Law School, can you tell us a little bit about
Howard University?
Sorry.
Howard University.
I'm bringing everybody to Hampton, sorry. Howard University Law School.
I have on the Howard
Show me
University
t-shirt.
Howard, right, yes.
Howard. So can you tell us a bit about your current role and what exactly is business management?
Yes, so I am a director in legal. I am the head of business management for BB PLC Legal, which is our investment banking part of the legal function. So we support banking, markets, et cetera. So all of the things you think of when you think about traders, we support that function. And what I do is I support my general counsel in strategic and operational advice and counsel. So anything that creates efficiencies for the legal department utilizing technology frequently, that's what we do, and that's what my team does.
Great. And Nicole, a proud graduate of Delaware State University, can you explain what exactly is media relations and how did you get into your current role?
So yes, so I had media relations for our partnership here at Barclays, and media relations, it's sort of like public relations, but I work very closely with the media. So oftentimes I consider myself to be the Olivia Pope. So my job is to get us on TV or keep us off. And originally, if I could be honest with you, when I first started school, I looked at Howard and I looked at Hampton, and I really wanted to go to both of them if I could. But for financial reasons, I ended up having to stay local and go to Delaware State University, which in my opinion was one of the best decisions of my life. I started off as a journalism major, but quickly realized that PR was my passion. And so from there, I then changed my journey and started in PR, and have been doing that for over 20 years now.
And we'll go to Eric Scott next, Captain Eric Scott. Can you tell us exactly what is a captain and how did you become interested in flying?
Well, a captain is, every airline has a senior pilot who's designated as pretty much the person in charge of the entire group. And that is the captain. That is my role. So every time I come to work, I'm basically working together with first officers like Kimberly McCalman and some in-flight flight attendants as well. So I'm the person who basically, in the end, is the person in charge. That's what a captain is. I became involved in aviation, or actually I started liking aviation when I was about 6 years old. I grew up in Latin America, and my dad used to work as a civilian for the military. So I used to see how the military airplanes flying around. And I actually wanted to be in the military as well, but growing up in Latin America, I did not have that opportunity. So when I graduated from high school in Panama, I had the opportunity to come to the United States at age 18. So I came here, I learned the language, and about 5 years later, I was able to go to college. And one of the colleges that I attended, that I applied to, was the University of North Dakota. And I've heard that they had a pretty good aviation program. So I applied, got accepted. I went there, and I graduated 4 years later with a Bachelor of Science in Aeronautical Studies. And then I stayed there. I did a little bit of instructing to build some hours. Then I got my first job at a small airline that had about, the airplane had 19 seats. This is back in 1996. And in 1999, I got my real break to work for a major airline when I got hired with US Airways. And then 9/11 happened, and a lot of us got laid off from our position. So the small company called JetBlue had just started about 2000. So I got laid off in 2002. And by the grace of God, I applied to this company called JetBlue, and I was selected as one of their pilots. So I got hired here in July of 2002, and I just started my 19th year at JetBlue. And it's been a great career.
Great, thank you. And First Officer McCalman, can you tell us what is a first officer, but also as a FAMU graduate, how did FAMU prepare you for your unique path to the cockpit?
So, I'm a little different. I went to Florida A&M because my brother went to Florida A&M in the 70s, 80s, and I wanted to go to USC. My parents were like, no, that's a choice. So, which was one of the best experiences of my life, going to Florida A&M. But like most of you, high school, middle school, I wanted to do everything, police officer, fireman, this, that, who knew? But I really didn't know what I wanted to do. But I was entered into the School of Business and Industry, SBI, at FAMU, which is known globally for its business program. And Sybil Mobley, our dean, was so instrumental. And I learned a lot, but I wasn't sure that I wanted to particularly be in business, but it gave me a wonderful base and background. And while I was in school, I decided I wanted to be an athletic director. I was a swimmer, and I was an administrative coach, and I interned in athletic administration. But like a lot of things, my opportunities to get employment after graduation kind of fell through. And I had a sister that worked for United Airlines who said, I can help you get a job. And incidentally, my father was a pilot from 1960. And so I've been around airplanes since I was a baby. I've met Tuskegee Airmen as a child, went to conventions and so forth. And it's one of those things where it's something that's planted in you, you don't really know it, but it will start to cultivate. And even if you try to get away from it, it will stay with you and it will manifest itself when it needs to. While I was working, this is the 5th airline I've worked for. I've worked in many different capacities. I started my career 20 years ago about 24 years ago with United Airlines as a customer service agent. Then I went to FedEx as a customer service agent. I started graduate school while I was there because they will help pay for school, which is a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful perk. But I left there because I was just unfulfilled and kind of wanderlust, looking for where's my niche. And I became a flight attendant for Northwest Airlines. And it was there that over the years I had met many pilots, specifically a lot of Black pilots, pilots of color. And I started asking like a whole bunch of questions, like, now that I'm in this work group that I'm a flight attendant, I'm like, what do you do? What is this? And it was a wonderful, first, I was actually a second officer at the time. It was on the 727. He asked me if I wanted to do his walk around with him, which we basically walk around the aircraft to make sure that we don't see anything that's adverse to the actual safety of flight, i.e., are the tires looking like they should look? Do you see any puddles that underneath the plane that don't look like they should be there? Is there anything that does not look, that's out of place? And that just, I was like, oh, this is amazing. And so I started researching flight schools. I've flown as a corporate pilot. I've been with a regional carrier. And now I've been with JetBlue. I start my 6th year in November. As a first officer, we are actually like the second in command. The pilot in command is the captain, such as Captain Scott said. As a first officer, I'm the second in command. So he and I would work closely together. We make decisions. He is ultimately what we call the person that's the pilot in command because he actually signs the logbook. However, as we have different things, different scenarios that come forth, we have what's called a mandatory 2-pilot flight deck. So there must be 2 pilots up there. So there's a captain and a first officer. We discuss all the things that come our way, basically from, it is a nice day today, or there's some weather over the Rockies, we're going west, or, there's a storm brewing, the route that they have and so forth. If the captain's unavailable to make some type of decision, I would have to make a decision, i.e., if he's off the aircraft for a minute, if there's something that has to be signed, depending on what it is, then I would then satisfy that requirement as being the second in command of the crew. This is probably the best job that I've never had because it's not really like I worked. And I just enjoy having fun. And it also gives me the opportunity to talk to young people such as yourself to get more of you involved because we're probably the lowest amount of persons of color in a particular industry, give or take.
Great. Thank you, Kim. And also rounding out our panel is Isima, who is one of the founders of JetBlue, which I'm sure probably requires a lot of STEM, whether on purpose or not. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience? What is it like and how did you help found a whole airline?
A whole airline. So, I was working in aviation at another airline and got a call to that said basically, listen, we're starting this airline in New York. Are you interested? And I said, no, thank you. I have a job with an airline that has planes, so that kind of is helpful. But I, they continued to pursue the conversation. And so I came over to Fifth Avenue to have an interview about starting this airline that was going to be really different. And I was still undecided, but at the end of the interview, our former CEO walked me downstairs and he said, look, kid, at the end of the day, if this doesn't work, we're in Manhattan. We'll get jobs. I'm like, oh, that kind of worked. Okay. And so that really started my career at JetBlue. I have a journalism degree, not from an HBCU, but I thought I wanted to go into journalism and took a detour into aviation. And 3 airlines later, here I am. Loving the industry. It is never the same, and it has been exciting. But to start the airline, I think more than anything else was really nerve-wracking because you are hoping that your concepts and your ideas are going to be embraced by the public because you need the public to fly. And so it was such a challenging experience, but a rewarding experience. And at the end of the day, my ultimate decision to come here and to help start JetBlue was to be able to know that there aren't a lot of Black women that can say they helped start an airline. And for that, I stand firmly on that decision. It was a risk, but it was a wonderful risk. And although in the traditional sense, when you think of science, technology, engineering, and math, you don't think of necessarily some of the corporate jobs that I've had at the airline, but at the end of the day, when we talk about the math part and budgets, it really comes into play. So all of the STEM acronym are important. All of the words there, math is so important. And if, no matter what you all decide to do to our participants, it is important to have a foundation in math. It is important to make sure that you have a foundation in science. It is, you cannot underestimate, and of course technology, so you cannot underestimate when these skill sets will pop up and when you'll need to use them. So regardless of what you do, know the importance of all of them.
Great, thank you. And as JetBlue celebrates our 20th anniversary this year, we thank ICEMA for helping us get off the ground. I will turn it over to our panelists who have attended HBCUs and just want to get maybe some thoughts from you on what it meant to attend an HBCU. And I know for me, it really was a sense of belonging and history and tradition that took me to Hampton. So curious, maybe we'll start with Azra. I know you probably had your choice of law schools, but what brought you to Howard Law School?
Yes. Yes. So both of my parents attended HBCUs. And they were small, historically Black colleges in Memphis and outside of Memphis. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee. And so when I began to think about law school, I went to the University of Virginia undergrad, and I had an African American studies degree. And one of my professors, Julian Bond, he taught history of the civil rights movement and was an amazing sort of like professor and, provided a lot of guidance. And I started talking about law schools with him, and I already sort of from my parents had this appreciation and love for HBCUs, and he thought that Howard would be the best fit for me. And a lot of it was him talking about his time at Morehouse, and his father was a president of Lincoln University. So that just continued sort of the love and appreciation I had for HBCUs. And when I got there to Howard, I think one thing is the feeling of being loved, right? My professors cared about my existence outside of my existence in the classroom. And even to this day, I feel like I have this network from even my classmates that I don't see my peers have with their law school classmates. When folks are networking, looking for jobs, or even just personal support, we're always there. And, I'm friends with my dean from law school on Facebook, right? Like we have regular connection, and that's, 20 years later. And that kind of belonging and support, I didn't find at UVA, right? And so, and in that sense, Howard was just a very unique experience.
Kim, what about you at FAMU? How was your experience?
Like none other. As said, I almost feel like I'm even more connected to Florida A&M now as a graduate versus as an undergraduate because of the experience, the number of people. If anyone in the HBCU world, Florida A&M has a very, very tight alumni, to the point I have been out of school now. My freshman class reunion would have been this year, 30 years, and we still go back to homecoming as if I was an undergraduate on campus. Just knowing, having been a part of the School of Business industry, and Dean Mobley was just amazing. Like, you see this older Black lady, and you're like, wow, we had 50 million CEOs from all over the country coming in. And now Dr. Shroud, Dr. Friday Shroud, she kind of picked up the gauntlet and just, as she was a graduate of Florida A&M, her brother, her sister, and now her being the dean of the School of Business has just taken it and just immobilized, just made it global. The fact that our president comes to our alumni in Chicago and as well all over the country, and just our alumni groups that are just so very strong in different places. Like I'm in LA today, my friend Joy, I had a panel that I set up for the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals for our annual conference last year in LA. And so I reached out to my friend Joy, who is an education major from Florida A&M, and she's a principal here in LA. And I said, hey, we have a panel about diversity and inclusion and dealing with schools and education. I wanted to know if you'd be a part. She said, absolutely. So just the fact that it's almost like FAMU is this little part of the wheel, and the spokes are just endless. Like, the wheel is huge, and I wouldn't trade that for anything. I did go to graduate school at Roosevelt University in Chicago. It was not there. I went to flight school at Western Michigan, and it was different because I was just there as a flight student. So I was there for one purpose only. So I didn't really get that camaraderie that I have with FAMU that I will always have, like, till the last of days. So
great. Thanks. And Nicole, you attended Delaware State, and now your daughter is attending Delaware State. Why was that important for you to continue that tradition?
Well, first I want to answer that question you asked the other panelists, and then I'll talk about my legacy. Sure. So I am a first generation college student. So I was the first person in my family ever to go to college. And so that's a proud moment right then and there. And so for an HBCU, it was important for me to go to an HBCU specifically because I had always been the little Black girl pretty much in everything I did. So whether it be Girl Scouts or piano lessons. So all of my teachers pretty much were white, except for maybe two my entire undergrad career. So it was important for me to be surrounded by Black excellence. So I can definitely relate to everything that both Az and First Officer Kimberly said in terms of that camaraderie and that connection and the relationships that I've had with my professors. So if something was off, what's going on, Nicole? They cared outside of the classroom, which is extremely important. And so that I learned really what it felt to be a whole student, not just a number in a class with like 300 students. We were very small. I feel like at Del State, I was a big fish in a small pond, and it afforded me a lot of opportunities that many of my other friends who went to PWIs, which are predominantly white institutions, just really couldn't relate to. So it is when we talk about, FAMU, I didn't go to FAMU, but I've been to a FAMU homecoming. That thing's legit. But like the homecomings and the camaraderie, I was in the band, so I was a flag girl. And so just having that whole experience, I think, will really what I didn't know then, but what I know now to be that Black excellence experience, wouldn't trade it for the world. And so education, it's a non-starter in my house. Education is key. It starts with your education. And so at a very young age, I would have my kids come with me to homecomings or come with me to just different events. And they were repping Del State. And so, when my daughter decided that she wanted to go to college and when we were talking about schools, I showed her everything. So I showed her, let's go to Howard, let's go to Hampton, let's go, you don't have to necessarily follow my footsteps, but the thing you have to do is go to college, and it needs to be hopefully an HBCU. And and so when she landed on Del State, I was like, yes. Not just because of the in-state tuition, but just because I knew the pedigree of professors, and I also knew the new president, Dr. Tony Allen, who's been a mentor for me, throughout the years. And so when she told me she was going to go to Del State and she wanted to go specifically because I went, I was like, there's the legacy. And so, and that's what I leave. And so I am so extremely proud of her. It's so funny because right before this started, she came in and I was like, shut my door. And she had on her Del State shirt. I almost was tempted to say, come say hi to the panelists, because she was repping DSU. So, for me, it very much is about legacy, and it's about continuing that education being at the forefront. And then just that foundation that you get, not only from the students and the friends that you make and the networks that you'll have throughout the years, but then also being able to have that relationship with your professors, with administration, everyone that I ran into at Del State, they wanted you to win. And I think now more than ever, that's so important that, they're giving you chances and they're giving you opportunities and they want to see you genuinely win. So that's the reason why I went to an HBCU. Well, I ride hard for all of them. I will definitely, it's Hornet Nation, but I will represent HU, whichever one you want to be, FAMU, because I know the pedigree and the product that comes out of it, which is, my hashtag Black excellence.
Great. Thank you for that. So as we dig into how STEM fits into each of your careers and jobs, maybe we'll go to Captain Scott next. So Captain Scott, as your job is to fly the planes, which I know requires a bunch of STEM that I'm not aware of, I know your job also depends on a variety of other people. Like your job is just a piece of the puzzle. Can you talk about maybe the other careers within aviation that are available besides being a pilot?
Yes. STEM plays a big role in aviation as a whole. When you think of science, technology, engineering, and math, they all come together for aviation. My part is, when you go to flight school, you learn about the science, you learn about the technology, you learn about the math that involves in it, and the engineering part of it too, in building the aircraft. So when you take all those pieces together outside of flying, you could pretty much become the person who builds the airplane. So then you have to get involved in the engineering part of it. Then you get involved in, if you're an engineer, then you figure out the science part of it as well, right? The airplanes have to, the math becomes a part of the STEM as well, where you have to figure out the weight and balance of your airplane, how much weight can the airplane carries and all that stuff. So if you think of any of those professions, you can think of any of those things that you can do in the aviation field. Outside of those professions, you can also think of people who work for the airline, like any of yourself, like yourself, for example. I mean, the airlines also have departments where, like Asima was saying earlier, right, where you could work in any of those other departments where it's not necessarily flying. At the airport itself, we have people who are baggage handlers who throw the bags on the airplane. We have people who have to check somebody in at the airport. People who have to push the airplanes back. Those are, we call those, those are jobs that are, when we all come together, it's people that you require in order for the airline to move. Then we have corporate jobs as well that are not part of the airline itself, but these are the corporate jobs that keep every airline together. So outside of flying, there are many, many, many jobs that you can do. You could become an aircraft mechanic, so the person who fixes the airplane. At JetBlue here, for example, we have not necessarily aircraft mechanics, but we have Wi-Fi. We also have TV, so you got to have TV technicians. You have to have people who fixes the Wi-Fi. So there's a variety of jobs that are available that are outside of flying and outside of the typical that you would think of for an airline.
Great, thank you. And Asima, although you didn't attend an HBCU, you went to Syracuse University. Right now, as part of your job in leading the diversity team for JetBlue is recruiting, helping the recruiting team. And I know you're a strong supporter of recruiting more from HBCUs. Can you give the students some tips maybe on how they can stand out as they apply for college and or for their first jobs?
Absolutely. Listening to the stories about the camaraderie at the HBCUs, that was something that was definitely missing from attending, not attending an HBCU. But we made many pockets of HBCUs at our university in order to kind of survive. So I love hearing the stories. But Tamara, to your question, I think one of the things that if I could tell any student applying to college, any student applying for a job, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. How you present yourself on paper, how you present yourself when you have an interview, how you show up every day is how people are going to judge you. And it is, we always have to work twice as hard. And for people to not think that that's not true this day and age is wrong. We still have to put our best foot forward every day. We have to show up and be present in a way that we want to be seen. We don't have many opportunities to not get it right. So make sure that your resume is crisp, do internships, and when you do an internship, show up every day. You should be the first one there and the last one to leave. You should be the one that brings innovation and ideas and creativity and a sense of engagement every single time that you show up. You should, take advantage. If you accidentally stumbled upon this panel, what are you going to learn from it? How do you take advantage of every single opportunity that is presented to you? And how do you make sure that you are showing up and presenting your best self every single day? Get assistance with writing your resume, find a mentor, and I cannot stress enough, do internships. And if you're in high school or in college and you're looking for an internship for the summer of 2021, you should be doing that now. Be prepared. Make sure that you go the extra mile and do your homework.
Thank you. So I'm going to go to some of the questions in the Q&A. And one question that came up, and I think it applies to all of the panelists, is have you experienced any setbacks because you are a person of color? Maybe I will throw it to Azra first to answer that.
Yep. Yes. The truth is I have, right? And I think that is the reality that many people of color in corporate America face, right? But I think what I focused on, and I tell my mentees to focus on, is working on things you can control, right? And so while I had to sometimes take a step back because I think, it was impacted by people's biases, what I learned was if people didn't think I could do something, I had to figure out how to show them that I could do it, right? Before, I had to prove I could do a thing frequently before I was given, right, the privilege to say I was actually doing it. And so that sort of, the mentality I always took. I knew frequently before promotions, I was promoted to director last year, is I had to operate on a director level for years before I was actually given that title. And those are real realities. But I think you have to know that going in, and then you have to be very strategic about mapping out your professional goals, because you will have to work and be more strategic to accomplish them.
Exactly. I will go to maybe Captain Scott and First Officer Kim next. I know the numbers of African or Black and African American pilots are very low. Less than 3% of pilots are Black or African American. And Kim, I know, is one of only 2 African American women pilots at JetBlue. So do you feel that, I guess, how does it feel to be in such a small percentage and maybe represent, Kim, in your case, you're representing Black women, just being one of 2. Can you talk about your experiences being pilots of color?
You want to start, Erin?
Well, I will start. I can start without a doubt. As Tamara mentioned earlier, we have a very small percentage of pilots of color, people of color who are airline pilots. And my experience per se has been at points were kind of difficult. And as I mentioned earlier, I grew up in Latin America, so I had to learn English as a second language, and then put myself through college, and then have to go through the vigorous job-seeking interviews. Aviation is a very, very competitive career. And when you are a person of color, you pretty much have to be crisp. And there were times for me where I was lacking some of that. My English wasn't very good per se, as far as I wasn't as crisp as going through the interview process. I see my mention earlier about mentor. And that's where mentoring becomes very, very important, because people like myself, like any of you on the panel here, you've already made it through the ropes, so you understand what it takes to become a professional. And for myself, I became really good friends with a good friend of mine when I was in college, and I didn't think I was going to make it through until I met this individual who happened to be another person of color. And I was complaining about not being able to speak English well and not understanding the material. And when this individual listened to me, he goes, "Well, have you listened to some of the Asian students here? They speak worse than you, and they're making it through." So that kind of gave me the incentive that, hey, yeah, I too could become an airline pilot. And eventually, because of that motivation, I made it through. Now you fast forward to graduating from college and trying to make it through the airline path. That was also very hard, because when you sit next to someone that's interviewing you and you can't express yourself the way they want you to, even though you're qualified to get the job done, and they don't give you the employment, then you feel that, well, how else can I, be better at, making it through the interview? And again, this is where mentorship comes available. And Kim mentioned earlier about the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. We have a unique group in the Organization of Black Aerospace Professionals. We're all pilots of color who have come together to help people like myself, other individuals that are coming forward in the path of aviation. And we mentor them like they did to myself in order for us to be successful. So that has helped a lot. And we have been able to place a lot of us in the cockpit of or flight deck of an airline, because we are all coming together. But the path for sure has been a very rigorous one. But nonetheless, the mentorship works very well, and we have to keep doing that. I would also say that it's really difficult if you're out there on your own and you don't know anyone. Myself, I did not know anyone when I went into aviation, so that was also very, very hard. I had to pretty much do everything on my own until I went to college, and then I met my great friend, and then out of aviation. But my path for sure has been difficult. I'm pretty sure there are some out there today that are probably from different countries that are trying to seek a path, in STEM or maybe in aviation. I will highly recommend getting together with a mentor or getting together with someone. A mentor is just someone who can help you, navigate through anything that you're going to do in life. And for most of us here in this panel, we've already been there. We already know how to navigate through that, so we can help a lot.
So, well, the first thing, I have been in this industry for a very, very long time, to the extent I am not anonymous, nor can I be anonymous, for the simple fact that I am one of very few. There are about 100,000 airline pilots today, give or take. I think our numbers may have just tipped 100 as far as Black female pilots.
Wow.
And for a long time, we teetered at under 20, very long. In that, I can't stress how important mentorship with someone who looks like you, because a mentor is someone that you may want to emulate. You see what they do and you like it. However, they may have different challenges than you may have. And how do you deal with that? How can you can talk, if I can talk to someone, and I'll give a story. I was a corporate pilot. I was the only Black woman. I think there were maybe 2 Black pilots at this company, and I was the only woman. I flew a family from somewhere in Texas to Florida. Everything was fine that I knew of. We left there. We went somewhere else in Florida. I picked up an older couple. We took them to Massachusetts. So the next morning, we got a letter from our chief that said, wonderful, kudos, and it was very well written. Specifically, the woman who wrote this letter, she basically said, that I had done a good job, because she and I had been talking about, I live in the Midwest, I live in Chicago, her sister lives in Wisconsin. We talked about our tulip struggling through the winter season and how cold it was still in the spring. And so she wonderfully written a letter, really nice. We got a kudos. And that next, not even an hour later, we got another letter, and they wanted us to explain. And the original family we had flown, which to us, and I was flying with the woman that was white, we didn't know if anything there was a problem. Everything was fine that we knew of. We spoke with the family, we talked to them, we had interaction, dialogue, all kinds of things. Well, the letter that came through negated everything. It was kind of like, where were they? And I remember how I felt about this, because I almost felt helpless and powerless. Like I did everything and then some, going above and beyond, because that's the job I know was asked of me as a corporate pilot. And I remember one of my girlfriends, who was the pilot for an airline, she was, I was in New Jersey, she was in New Jersey, and I said, hey, you got some time? Can we go have dinner or something? And she was like, yeah. And we went to this diner, and I remember us sitting there, both of us in tears, because I was like, this will never stop. So the fact that I know this will not stop, but how do I deal with it so I can keep it going? And as we sat there, we had tears, and then we dried up our faces and fixed our faces and like, okay, now how are we going to do this? And this is something that's why I say it's so important to have a mentor, specifically someone that looks like you, because I know I've had women that I've flown with who have asked me, well, people talk about you being a woman and so forth and so on. I said, well, and I use this terminology and I love this woman, that Southern woman I flown with. I said, well, that's the plumbing I was born with, and that's what I got. And I revel in that. So that means if somebody's like, oh, wow, great, a woman flying today. You are so right. Thank you very much. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Because that you got to take what's given to you. And so, and I'm thankful that I had older parents. I have the baby of 4 siblings. All my siblings are much older than I am. And just having conversations and knowing some of the things that they went through, I was like, they went through at a time which I'm like, I really don't know if I could have made it, because I am the power to the people. And no, this can't be done. And we got to do this another way. And I'm like, I don't know. But I'm thankful for all the talks and the things that my parents and my siblings imparted to me. And then I take that forth. And now I talk to young people such as that look like me to say, hey, well, what are you doing? Well, let's talk about this. No, I don't think that's a good idea, my girlfriend. Let's talk. Because I'm always going to be a Black female. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm always be a Black female pilot, because that's what I like doing. So in that case, I'm reveling that. And there's nothing that somebody's going to tell me. My father always told me, you are the greatest thing going. I was like, you're right. And it's not something that people like you respect, and so but respect yourself. Have confidence in yourself. That's one of the biggest things that I learned. Mm-hmm. Have confidence in yourself. And once you have that, there's nothing you can do, and there's nothing somebody can tell you otherwise. Because who can steal what's in here? Nobody, unless you want to give it away. I don't like giving things away, per se. So.
Great advice, Kim. And so as we move into how STEM fits into your everyday jobs, I think we can understand that STEM is required to keep planes flying, but maybe let's go to Nicole and Isema next, where STEM is not necessarily your core job, but you have to have an understanding of STEM. Nicole, can you talk about how you maybe translate financial information or other STEM related kind of complex topics so that it's understandable for everyone?
Yeah, so I will say that I never thought that I would have a role in STEM. You know, my undergrad originally was in broadcast journalism. Then I went from broadcast journalism to PR. I dabbled in marketing, and then they told me I was going to have to take all these statistic courses. I was like, nope, never mind, because math was just never a strong suit for me. And so to say now that I'm working in, banking and for one of the largest banks, at least in Europe, I just never would have guessed. And so, but one of the things that I learned early on, even in my writing courses, is that, when you are writing, especially like a press release or something as it relates to the public, is that you really going to have to write it as if it's at a 6th grade level. So how do you do that when you are writing about financial topics specifically? How do you do that? And you're writing it in layman's terms. So you have to educate yourself, and so that you can then first understand, so then you can then translate it for others so that they can read it and they can understand as well. And so that's pretty much on my day-to-day. So whether it's writing a press release about a new partnership and explaining about the value prop of a credit card and 2 times earned and two times miles and all of that good stuff, where people are like, what? It's like, a penny per dollar. And so things that you would never thought you would have to do before, I now have to do in my everyday, and can do and write it in a way that average Joe would be able to understand. And so I think, so when we think about demystifying or debunking STEM, or saying don't get stumped by STEM, it's not to shy away from science, engineering, technology, or math, but figure out how it can relate to you and what you want to do. And then know that, I still can do this. When I first started out working, my very first job was with the National Basketball Association. I thought that I knew nothing about basketball, but I did know how, again, to get you on TV or to keep you off. And so from that, I then had to quickly pivot and learn the craft. I think it's learning the industry versus learning your craft. So the industry, whether it's in, again, science, technology, engineering, or math, you might need to learn, whether working for an airline or working for a bank or working what that means, right, as it relates to average Joe, and figuring out how to then translate that in a way that people will understand, and in a way that you'd be able to understand. So every day I'm learning. And I think, as we're talking about having mentors and having confidants and folks that you can speak to, there have been times when, like, I need you to explain to me what a basis point is, because I don't understand this. And I have to write an article about this, and I need to be able to do it in a way that people can understand. So help me to understand, and feeling that you can have those courageous conversations to talk to folks, to say, raising your hand to say, I really don't understand this, but help me understand it. And then you realize, oh, that's what that means. So not everything that looks as complex as you think at first glance, it really is, if you just need someone to help and explain it to you. And so on a day-to-day, I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly growing, and now I can do things on the back of my hand that I thought before I would never be able to do, and shied away from, quite frankly. And so I think, I've been at Barclays for almost 9 years now, and I will say that this is, it's been such a wonderful journey for me, and I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly growing, whether it's, talking to and who's over in the investment side of the house, and so having to learn about investments and the like, and what that looks like, to launching a new value prop for a credit card, working very closely with my JetBlue counterparts as well. So if I need to talk to Tamara about, how do we write this, or what do we do from it, and she can give me that airline speak, so that so that we are factually correct when it comes to the industry, I think is extremely important. And so again, coming from the NBA now to working over into STEM, I wouldn't change it for the world, because I've learned and I've grown as a result of it. But I will say that it is a challenge, and on a day-to-day basis, I don't want to like writing about basis points and the like, but if I could do it in a way that average Joe can understand and relate to, it's been a journey, but a fun one.
Great, thank you. So Isima, I know you studied journalism in school and maybe didn't ever envision that you would be, I know when you started at JetBlue, you led the JFK operations for JetBlue, where I know a lot of STEM was required. And now being in our support center, how does STEM fit into your current day-to-day role, and what are some of the other jobs available in the support center, or what we call our support center, which is our headquarters for an airline?
I think that, one of the things about STEM is, as I said before, whether you focus so much on the science and the technology, the engineering, the math part is going to be there no matter what you do. So managing a budget, being able to ensure that you are meeting financial goals, making sure that you are knowledgeable in how to calculate salaries. I think that's something that you all should be making sure that you're doing. What are the proper salaries for your job, and knowing how to negotiate. So math will always be there. That third grade teacher that told you to know your multiplication tables, you will find out that she or he was absolutely right. That will follow you forever. So I think the math part is, if I can emphasize anything, it's important to make sure that you know how to do math, and that you don't sleep on your math skills, because you will need them throughout the entire course of your career, no matter what you're doing. I think one of the things that I have the privilege of is, as we leading the diversity, equity, and inclusion team, is looking around our corporate office, and you have the finance team, you have the marketing team, you have the brand team, you have the revenue management team that decides, when you sit next to somebody and you say, well, I paid $39 for this flight, and somebody says, I paid $139 for this flight. Somebody does that equation to make sure at the end of the day it all balances out. You have your benefits team, you have your wellness team, you have your compensation team. So there's so many things that you can do within the airline. Just as any corporation has a ton of departments, aviation has a ton of departments as well. I think one of the things that might be a little bit different is that there's so much STEM happening here. So whether it's the engineering team, whether it is the dispatching team, to make sure that Captain Scott and First Officer Kimberly can fly properly and the routes that they fly. So making sure that you have the proper weight on board the aircraft. So there are so many opportunities to infuse STEM into our industry. But at the end of the day, regardless of what any of you are interested in doing, math is a key component to all that you do. And I think it's important for you to remember that, embrace it, learn your multiplication tables, like your third grade teacher said, so that you can continue to explore the elements of budgeting and making, for your household, even your household budget, making sure that you are just on point from a math standpoint. So there are many careers to pursue within aviation. I think that is always captivating to listen to our pilots speak, especially because it is so infrequently that you see pilots of color, specifically. I have to give Kim her props. We drag her out all the time to speak to students because regardless of who you are and how much you travel, there is such a low probability that you've even flown with, seen an African-American female pilot. So you can be a pilot at an airline and join the ranks of Eric and Kim, or you can do the corporate side of an airline. But there are so many jobs and so many things to explore. I think one of the things about that I'm excited about working with the foundation is that at the end of the day, we provide opportunity and access to children who normally would not have it, or students who normally would not have it. And so what I encourage all of you to do is be a trailblazer and make your own opportunity, find your own opportunities, and then ask for access. LinkedIn is a wonderful tool to find people who are doing some of the things that you're doing. Search the internet, Google is our friend, and just really understand all of the breadth of opportunities that you have available.
Thank you. And Azra, maybe can you share some other career options that are available within the financial institution or banking industry?
Yes, and I'll even mention specifically law, because I think, frequently forget that there's usually huge legal teams that support banks and corporations or airlines. We have a legal team of about 800 folks at Barclays on the investment bank side, and Barclays Card has their own legal team, right? So there's a whole operations behind supporting a financial institution. And so, when I started working for Barclays, I was on the e-discovery team, and this shows the connection between law and STEM in a way that I think people frequently don't think go together. But I was the e-discovery counsel, and what I did was basically translate how do we align the legal strategy, right, or the goals of a regulator with a technical strategy, because students will know. You guys know, people send emails like crazy, right? And so I'll have a matter that we need to investigate, and we could have 6 million emails, right? But we need to figure out, because of our regulatory obligations, what happened in a particular situation if someone was accused of misconduct. And so what I would use is technology, and I made sure I stayed up on the most innovative tools and ways that we could do that in a way that was cost efficient for the bank, but also reduced our risk. And I don't think that people frequently think that you can use technology in any field. You could be a lawyer and use technology. Even now, doctors, right? I mean, I feel like technology is anything you decide you want to do in 2020, you should be comfortable with technology and have a strong, solid math and science background, because you likely need to utilize it. And it can be a competitive advantage.
Sure. I definitely agree. We have some questions coming in for our pilots, so maybe for Kim and Eric. What are some of the perks of working for an airline? What are some of the perks or benefits?
Like benefits. Travel. But even more so than that, I think scheduling. So I don't like working weekends, so I work Monday through Thursday. That's what I choose to bid, and based on my seniority, I can hold that. And as well, I commute. My base is in one city, New York, and I live in another city, Chicago. So that being the case, I try to minimize my time away from home. It's called quality of life. And so that's what my choice is. Other folks choose different things. I think Eric chooses some different things. That's why we flew together one time.
One of the biggest perks is that sometimes you get to fly with your favorite pilot, right? Like Kim and I, like to say, we've flown together once. The camaraderie among pilots, is a unique one. Oftentimes you never fly with the same pilot twice. But like Kim and I, we've known each other for quite a while now, and every time you see each other, it's like you just saw them yesterday. So that's one of the biggest perks, that sometimes you get to fly with some of your best buddies. But on the other side too, like Kim was saying earlier, I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota myself, and I'm based here in New York City. So one of the biggest perks is that you get to fly on any other airline at no cost. So that's how we make it to and from work. And that's why you're able to live wherever you want to. Working for JetBlue, my family and myself, we get to travel at no cost also on JetBlue. And so those are some of the biggest ones. Obviously, the compensation is pretty good as well. That's why I always said, and I encourage any of you out there who want to become a pilot, please do not look at the tag price when you are thinking of college, because you will collect the dividends in the end. I'm living proof of that. I've always wanted to be a pilot, and I just wanted to fly the airplanes because, it's pretty cool. One of the coolest things for me about flying the airplane is that every time I take off and I'm in the air and I look out my window, I mean, you can see as far as the eye can see. And for me, that's been my future. It is just as far as the eye can see, and it's been a pretty solid, bright one, smooth flying all the time. But when you talk about the financial side of it, it could be a little daunting, and you could say, well, I don't want to be a pilot because it costs so much. But the best analogy that I can use, that I've always used, is that someone loaned me $5, and they said, hey, when you are done with your education, you have to pay me $10. But out of those $5, you're going to make $100. Okay? So now I'm paying you 10 out of the 100. I get to keep 90. And all I had to do was go to college. Somebody was trusting me for me to trust myself and go to college and get an education. And that's how I look at, the financial aspect of financing your education. So please don't think of it as a burden, because it's a good bill to have, per se.
Good debt. It's good debt versus.
Yes, it's a good debt. There you go. It's a good debt to have. But yeah, so one of the perks is that, hey, if someone is willing to lend you money to go to college, and then you're going to collect dividends in the end, please do not hesitate to do it.
So another question for our pilot friends. Are there specific majors or courses that you would recommend for those interested in becoming a pilot?
So I looked at that question, and so these days it's a little different depending on, if you're interested in being a pilot, airline pilot specifically, and we call that a Part 121 operator. Certain universities have flight programs. There are 9 HBCUs that have flight programs of sort, and there are other PWIs that have flight programs. Now, based on the curriculum at some of these institutions, if you have done, and I believe it's over 60 credit hours or more, once you finish in that major, i.e. flight science, or I think it is all flight science or aviation science, one of those, which has the flying curriculum attached to it, then you are able to, at 1,000 hours of flight time, be eligible under, I forgot the name of the program, but you'll be eligible to then get a job as a working pilot at an airline, i.e. a regional carrier. If you have, I believe, 31 to 60 hours, the requirement is 1,250 hours of total flight time that you have to have. But again, that's within that curriculum. That's that curriculum of classes. So a class sometimes can be 3 credit hours, 4 credit hours, it depends. And if you have up to 30 hours, I believe, then you'll have to have 1,500 hours. And that's just as if you went to a local airport and said, I want to learn how to fly. You found a flight instructor and you started working your way through your licenses and ratings that way. You would then have to have at least 1,500 hours of flight time. So that's in going through a school that has a program. I do tell people if that's what your goal is, then be strategic in that and also get a minor in something, i.e., CIS is very strong, very prevalent right now. A minor is something that you can fall back on in the event, because aviation is a cyclical industry. As we all know, we're right now in a pandemic. As such, people are not moving around as much as they are. And that does make a difference within aviation, because what do? We move people. So always have something that you can fall back on, because you got to eat, you got to live. So you need to have something that you can use to make those things happen. If I hope that answers the question. I did see that in the Q&A chat.
Thank you.
And even within the pilot ranks too, Kim was alluding to getting different majors. We have pilots who also get their MBAs, and then you could become a manager for the pilot group, or vice president of flight operations.
JDs. We got pilots that get JDs. We have pilots that are nurses. We have some pilots that are nurse practitioners.
I would say that when you go to college, you have the opportunity of majoring, like double majoring or triple majoring. So you can take the opportunity to do that as well while you're in college. We have pilots here who study computer science as well. So they are the ones that develop some of the programs up that us as pilots use in our iPads. So they get to, they still fly the airplanes, but they work in a different department as well, developing different programs for us to use. So there's so many different things that you can do within the aviation pilot group. And so once you're in college, you can figure out what other majors you can take, while you're there too, and double major or triple major or even a minor while you're there, that if anything, that you can have different skill set as well. Because there's so many people who have different skill set who just don't want to just fly airplanes. They want to do something else as well. Some people go into engineering while they're going to flight school.
Right.
Thank you, guys. I think we're just about at time, but maybe we'll close with a 10-second tip for these budding STEM students in today's session. Maybe we'll start with Azra, if you have a quick tip for these students as they look towards college and beyond.
Yeah, my tip is, if you get a chance to visit a university before you attend, you should absolutely do that. I know a lot of programs have tours that you can sign up for if it's something you want to do, and also talk to your parents, but visit your colleges ahead of time.
Nicole, any tips?
I'm going to say follow your heart. Right. I think that's the biggest thing. I know listening to our parents, oftentimes, our parents want us to be, no offense, pilots or attorneys or doctors or whatever, but follow your heart, find your passion and stick with it, because it's going to be so happy. This is a life choice for you. Right. And it's okay if you make mistakes. Right. You might start off in one major and then decide, there's another major that you might like. And then you say, that's not it. I want to do something else. You know what? Just keep trying, but don't give up. Just keep trying and stick to your guns, because you can and you will. There will be some good days and there are going to be some bad days, but just know that you're going to follow your heart and trust your gut. And so I'm excited to see you guys on the other side. I've been kind of scrolling through and reading a lot of these Q&As, and I am excited for every single one of your futures. You can and you will. Trust your gut. That's my advice.
Thanks, Nicole. Isima, do you have a quick tip?
I sure do. Practice your elevator pitch.
Mm-hmm.
Be able to tell anybody who asks you what you want to do, what you want to do. Be able to articulate how you think you're going to get there. Make sure that you can articulate your vision. And like Nicole said, it might change. If it changes every day, practice what it is that day and be good at that. Make sure that you can tell anybody in the world what you want to do. And make sure that you are always ready at a dime's notice to tell your story.
Captain Scott?
I will say be you. Find someone that if you decide that what you want to do, find someone that's already in that profession, and maybe they can walk you through what it takes. Stay engaged, get a mentor, basically, and follow your heart.
And First Officer McCommon.
I'm so sorry, I was answering these questions. Oh my goodness. The one thing I will always tell you, sometimes you'll never get a second opportunity to make a good first impression. So as Isima said, your elevator pitch, as said, going to a school, you can put all these things together and follow your heart. All these things together make up you. So bring your best you to every single event. And if it seems like somebody's like, oh, you kind of dull, oh, you kind of this and that, like, you're right, and I'm gonna be the best dull there is. Thank you very much. And keep moving, because you always want to stand out as a star. They say diamonds come in the rough, right? But after you dust it off and chisel it up, what does it do? It shines. So be that diamond that shines. Whatever somebody thinks it is, whatever, you know what you're going to bring to the table. Always have what I call your little bag of tricks. You should always have something you can pull out that you need. And you're like, oh, people are like, oh, I didn't think you were ready. I'm ready. Stay ready.
Stay ready.
Stay ready.
Stay ready. You don't have to get ready.
Exactly. I agree with all of those tips. I follow lots of those tips. I would say also just continue to learn, be open to new opportunities, and network as much as possible. And with that, I believe most of us are on LinkedIn. So if you all want to hit us on LinkedIn, we will definitely try to answer you back and stay in touch that way. We'll try to get to some of the additional questions in the Q&A feature by email maybe. But other than that, this was a very quick hour, but we hope it was informational for you, and good luck in your journeys onto college and HBCUs. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It was great.
Bye, everyone.